Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. My name is Josh King.
My name is Sam, and we have a guest on the show today that I am excited to introduce. How about this? Scott Pattison. Everybody knows who Scott Pattison is. So, Scott, welcome to the show.
It's like nobody knows who Scott Pattison is.
I said that for a reason. Yeah, well, I mean, people do. They kind of do. You're probably not a household name in the evangelical world. Let's just get that out there. But I love what you're doing, why you're doing it, and there is a big movement that is occurring that you are a part of. And I'll get to all that here in just a moment. But before we do, I want to thank our sponsor, Church Teams. We have really enjoyed having Church Teams as a sponsor of the show because it's nice to have someone sponsor the show where you believe in what they're doing, you believe in their resources, you believe in their products. And Church Teams is the group, the business that you want to call if you have any church management software needs. They really do it all. From texting, which if you're not doing text to church, you need to start. Because 90% of text messages are read within 3 minutes. Wouldn't it be great to communicate with everyone in your church in 3 minutes? Well, you can do that with the program that Church Teams offers. They have a lot more as well, so you can go to est.church to check out their offer. They got 2 free months that they are giving to our listeners. You fill out the form, they will contact you and give you just an overview of what they do. It's, no risk. You can go check out all that they have to offer. I would absolutely encourage you to check out Church Teams. We thank them for sponsoring us. Now, we have Scott Pattison here on the show today. Scott is part of the Global Methodist Church. We've talked about the Global Methodist Church prior. It's an episode called What on Earth is Happening with the Global Methodist Church. And I think I have an interrobang in the title, and an interrobang is that exclamation point with the question mark. It's one of my favorite punctuation symbols. He is the president pro tempore, which sounds so impressive. Very Latin of you, Scott. Why don't you just tell us a little bit, because we're going to talk about risk. We're going to talk about taking a big risk in ministry, which you have done within the Global Methodist Church. But tell us just a little bit about what you do and what your role is.
Yeah, no, glad to be here. Thank you. It's fun to be a part of what you guys are. You guys have been so helpful in the podcast and other roles and in other areas. So my role has been, I've been a United Methodist pastor my whole life. My dad was a United Methodist pastor, but part of that has been, there's been a group of the Reform movement within the United Methodist Church to hold to biblical orthodoxy, and it got to a breaking point the last couple of years, and a new movement has emerged out of that. And within leading those different ones, and now leading the formation of a provisional annual conference, the formation of a new denomination, it's just kind of moving from leading a church through that and then helping other people get in, leading the team to create a new annual conference, and now we'll be leading a new annual conference, and that's how that role has kind of emerged for my role to be president pro tem of the Great Lakes Provisional Annual Conference.
So you're in Indiana, local church pastor. Connection Church is the name of the church.
Yep.
And you've been doing this a long time. Been a pastor for pretty much your whole career. And the reason I say this is you're the kind of pastor, you know what you're doing. Like you understand what the role is. You're not new, and yet there's this movement that forms. There's this new group, a denomination. Boy, we don't talk about new denominations, which is part of why I find this so fascinating, because here we have a new denomination that is forming. By the way, fastest growing denomination in the world right now. It's like the only denomination in the world that's growing. It's just, and rapid. It's just this rapid rise. If you are not paying attention to what's going on at the Global Methodist Church, you need to be paying attention simply because of how quickly things are moving. But you took a big risk in this role. You led your church to move into being a Global Methodist Church. What constitutes a big risk? That's the name of the episode is, hey, we're taking a big risk when making a ministry transition. What would you say was your big risk?
Yeah, so there's multiple. The interesting thing is what we've jokingly talked about, but it's kind of a reality, is the United Methodist Clergy Union is a really good union. We have guaranteed appointment. We have, once you're in, it's kind of like professor tenure. Once you're in, you're guaranteed. And to be able to move from the denomination was big risk because you step away from, and we stepped away from those. In creating a new denomination, it's the nice thing is I'm helping form that and helping to create that. And so I'm helping to do that, but there is big risk. So just simply realigning, getting our church out, realigning, my guaranteed appointment went away. I no longer have that guaranteed thing. So that was a big risk. Now moving into this role, our leadership said, I thought I was going to be doing this role co-vocational, pastoring the church, also then serving the Great Lakes Provisional Annual Conference. Well, 4 states, and these are 4 large states, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, they said that's not sustainable. So it's like, okay, I got to take this step and do this full time, because I thought I would, in case this didn't work out, we're still figuring out what the role of the president pro tem is, what the role of bishop is, how that is, and felt like I've got to take a step. So when my wife and I last year, we took a step of faith. We were one of the first out. We didn't know what our insurance was going to be. We didn't know what our pension was going to be. Those had not been decided when we left. And we prayed about it, and we said, we feel called that we cannot stay. We feel called to go and to be a part of helping form this new denomination. We've been helping midwife it through the Wesley Covenant Association. And now when the Global Methodist Church went live May 1, 2022, felt led to be a part of that. And so there's been multiple levels of risk and stepping forward and then going, there's no safety net. We've got to move forward. The crazy thing is I have felt more alive in my faith than I ever have, and yet have less security from a professional standpoint than I ever have.
Yeah, Josh, this whole idea of guaranteed appointment, that's not something that we get in Baptist world.
No, most of this isn't anything we do in Baptist world. We don't have bishops or presidents or,
We have president. We have a president of our denomination.
That's true. That's true. We don't have ones of state denominations. I guess we do.
We have executive directors. We just call them different titles. It's all the same. It's all the same stuff. We just put different labels on it.
I'm sure they're identical. Yeah, no, this is not something that we do, but the idea of risk is definitely there. It's baked in. And so anytime you're taking a new pastorate or you're moving to a new church or you're going to try to lead the church that you're at, to take a risk, that might be relocating the church, or it just may be, adding a service or doing away with a ministry. There's a lot of risk involved in that, even if you are not launching a new denomination. So I think that the conversation is something that we deal with a lot, and managing sort of our expectations and our hearts as we walk into that conversation.
So, Scott, you're later in your career. I won't reveal your age. I won't do that to you. But, you're later in your career. I think a lot of people your age would have said, I've got a pension. I've got a guaranteed appointment. I've got all the connections I need. I'm very safe in my calling, and frankly, I've earned it. I think a lot, and you wouldn't have been wrong for thinking any of those things. And yet you left all of that. And, as you're like, hey, I've got one good season left, and, this is how I'm going to finish strong. And you gave all that up to start a new denomination, which most people would say, good luck. You want to start a new denomination?
Yeah,
good luck with that. Yeah. Walk us through, because a lot of our listeners are younger. In fact, they're younger than us. Josh and me, subjective pronoun, Josh and me. Walk us through taking that risk later in your career. What was that like?
Yeah, so according to your research, I'm average.
Well, that's true. That's true. You are right at the average. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. As you were walking that through, I realized there's a level of holy discontent and leaning into. I did my doctoral work in looking at the principles of renewal and revitalization of the Methodist movement. So, that stirred me, and God has. What I'm realizing in this season, God had planted a stirring about a decade ago that I kind of forgot about because it didn't come to pass. And so I was just like, okay, I guess that's not it. And in this season, as we've been living it out, we went into, should we stay? Well, we can't stay. So, but when the journey was before COVID, we said, this is an opportunity. The world as we know it stopped. And we have to lean into this. So I think that helped start some of this because we realized the world as we knew it stopped, and we have to live into it. So we, in our leading here in this local setting, we just started leading into the world as we knew it ceased to exist in March of 2020. And so that was part of that journey, was the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And we had the denominational conversation, but we're on hold. And so we were doing some things that worked and blew up, but we said yes to a vision. So we just kept saying yes. And what I'm realizing now, it's just that as we were moving, God prepares us for the next step through each situation. And even the horrible ones, what I'm realizing, one of the phrases I've said is the wrapping paper may be pretty crappy, but there's a gift inside. But we've got to get past that crappy wrapping paper. And it's getting into those and just seeing where the gift is and realizing, as I look backward now, God was preparing in each stage, even before this season. But, I mean, we did led a church out of a denomination, led a church through that conversation, led the church into aligning with a new denomination. We did a full rebrand. And this was post-COVID. So in my 4 years in this local congregation, we've not known normal. And so we've just kept moving forward. And there are those of my colleagues that said during COVID, we locked down, we're not doing anything, no pun intended. When it came to the disaffiliation conversation, there were those that are my age and younger and older that said, I'm riding this out. I mean, the phrase they've used is, I'm just going to keep my head down and I'm going to just ride it out. I couldn't do that. I would not feel good about myself. Through some challenging times, the gift was there were some moments that really severed some of my ties through moments of unfairness and unkindness. But I think the key is, do you let those moments lock you down and put you in freeze mode? And that's an option, and many have. But we just kept moving forward and kept saying yes and kept leaning forward. It wasn't always easy. Learned about lament, learning to lean fully into God when things make no sense. And so that season of, God, what are you up to? And we really came to a moment where we probably would have walked away from church, but we said, no, we trust God. And we couldn't always do church, but we always said yes to Jesus. We always said yes to God. We said, God, you are a good God. You have everything in play. And so once we leaned in, and over a season of leaning into God, when it came into these moments, it was pretty easy then to be able to go, okay, God, you led and were faithful in these. When others may not have been, you were faithful. And I think we had a track record, God had a track record. And then when it came to those career pieces, we're just like, God's got this. It may not make sense to us. We may not see it. And I'm not saying it's always been easy. I'm not saying it's always easy now. But there is that place where it's like, I don't understand it. And I don't know what you're doing, but I know you. And you're the God who guides our steps and holds our days. And I have to trust you. And we're in a season where people are walking away, dismantling their faith, walking away. And this has been a season that it's forced us to make a decision. But we chose to lean in and just say, God, you're God, and I'm going to trust you. I'm going to step forward. And God continues to reveal himself. And sometimes the packaging is pretty crappy. Sometimes it's not. But I'll tell you one thing, my faith has been more alive in this season than it ever has been, because we're having to actually walk in faith. And when you're dealing with a lot of guarantees, you can talk about faith, but a moving message in a guaranteed setting just simply means people are moved, and you might have some uncomfortable conversations. I know for my friends in the call system, a moving message means a moving van is there on Monday morning. That moves north toward reality. How do you have that? We still have an appointment system that adds some of those pieces, but there's a level of we've got to live out our faith, and that's what this season has really been for us, and it's really stretched our faith, pushed us to really go, what do we believe in, and how do we really believe and think of God?
Yeah, I think one of the things that resonates most with your story, at least to me, is part of this risk for you was leaving a community, a group of people that this is your whole life. This was your father's whole life.
Yeah.
And that's certainly my story as well in my tribe. This is my whole life. This, my father's what he did. I actually grew up Methodist, so I'm sorry he, left the Methodist Church to become Baptist, but that's a whole nother story.
We have room for him.
He can tell. Yeah.
We have room.
Come back.
We have room.
He'll come back. He'd gladly come back. So, that's tough. That's really, just, this is all I've ever known. And yeah, you're leaving the pension. Yeah, you're leaving the safety net. But you're also walking away from, the thing that identifies you, right?
Yeah. It's been fascinating. And you used a phrase, institutional friends. And that, I didn't think I had those until I found out I did. And, the people that turned their back, that were no longer friends, that were only friends if I agreed with them. But the cool thing is, and this has been something that's been unpacking for the last couple of years, you use the word tribe, I've been getting to know my new tribe. And instead of being bound to a part of Indiana, I'm sitting in 2 meetings a month where we're dealing with international leaders. We're dealing with people across the world and across the nation informing this. So my tribe, my territory has definitely expanded. And we're the part have been fighting for renewal, but now we get to create a new movement again in the form of a new denomination, but we're wanting to make it movemental. We're wanting to learn, and but it has been hard to step away and go, wow, I thought this person was my mentor and friend, and then to find out they're not. But God has opened up some neat doors, new friendships, new relationships, new tribe. Our group that has created the Great Lakes Provisional Annual Conference has met weekly since February. And yet here we are meeting weekly. We have a couple of meetings a week. And we have developed some great friendships when we see each other in person, because most of them have been on Zoom calls. It has been a great reunion and hugs. And so it's been neat how God has actually brought new community. And this level of community, there's a level of trust. We don't have to worry about what we say. We know we believe similarly, theologically, methodologically, and many of those things.
What I find so interesting is that your risk was taken as an extension of your integrity and your character. So this wasn't something that you did in order to stick it to the United Methodist or in order to join a movement, because those things they're superficial at best. But you got to a point where you were like, I've got to take this risk because I could do no other. And I think that speaks to a lot of people who are in a season where maybe they want to move churches or cause a new thing in their church or help with something like that. It has to come down to a point at which you go, I have to. I can't. I could just sit, but I have to move, that sort of stuff. Yeah. And it'd be an extension of character as opposed to other motivations that are out there. That's what's going to help you weather the risk that's going to come and the season that's going to be there.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I've got to look at myself in the mirror. I've got to look at my wife in the eye, and we both had to feel good. And so I think the interesting thing is this last season of life, I could do no other, because if I would just kind of go out with a whimper, what would I have invested in? And so this is exciting to be able to say, no, I'm gonna end strong. I have no idea where it's going, but I know the one who does. And I would rather go out feeling good that I at least took those steps of faith. I took those steps of building something. Had no idea. So a year ago, I had no idea this role would be the one I would be in. This is the next thing. How can I help? And that has been the piece as we just keep moving forward. And I think that's the same place. It's that faithfulness and integrity. Bloom where you're planted. If you're always looking for the next place, and whether or not you're in an appointment system or a call system, our colleagues, we always, we do have that, looking for the next place. And if you've got to dance with the one who brung you type thing, you just got to be there. And when God says this season is ended, then you separate at that point. But until then, I think God's going to move in those moments and give you the skill set for the next.
Yeah.
You've brought up something that's so incredibly important. If you live a life of conviction, you will not live a life of comfort. And, living by that conviction and risk that's driven by conviction is something completely different than, say, a business endeavor. Not to diminish anybody that takes business risk, because there's a lot of financial risk involved with that. But from a spiritual standpoint, when you believe that I have to do this from a place of conviction, and Josh, I'm glad you brought that up, it really does add a layer to it that, man, I'm not going to live comfortably. I may never feel the comfort that I want to feel. I'm walking away from comfort. You talked about your wife. So for our listeners, I think this is a good place for us to kind of land the plane. What if we've got people listening thinking about making a similar kind of leap? To what degree should family be involved in the decision, and what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so for us, the commitment has always been we both have to be on board, or else it's a no. And so for every move, even when we've been called and said, hey, you've been appointed, you have 24 hours to say yes, we both had to say yes, or we both had to say no. If we had disagreement, it was don't move. And that's how we've done our marriage. I believe that needs to be there. If a couple is together, they need to be able to both hear from God and both have a set with that. That gives a level of security, because if you both hear from God, then you're going to be there. And when you're feeling kind of low, you're feeling kind of off, you need the other one to be strong in those moments. And so we have had the ebb and flow. When I was weak, she was strong. When she was weak, I was strong. And then when we're both strong together, there's a conviction to be able to say, I don't get it, but you got to. And it's been really, really important. And I think, if we have two grown adult boys, young men, but when they're at home, we would bring them into the conversation appropriately, not at the front end, but when it started to go, this is a thing, we would say, hey, this is happening. We want to bring you in. What do you think? One, I think it trains the discernment process. If we never give people a chance to listen to God and respond to the Holy Spirit's prompting, then how do we train that? And that happens at home. And I think God speaks through community in that sense, particularly in the family at that point, to go, what are we hearing? The neat thing is on this side, so my schedules, and we're not sure what this is going to play out. My schedule is going to be very different than we've ever known. But the security that is there, that we both have come to this, is my wife is now going, no, that's what you need to do. And I'm okay with it. And it's going to be, so it's given her a security and a voice that if I had just said, hey, I'm going to do this, I think that's where we see clergy marriages break down. I think any marriage, but particularly in the clergy, and we're supposed to be that faith-based, and God moves in the ministry of the couple.
All right, so you said something. I just got to point this out, because I think some of our listeners who aren't familiar with your world, particularly the Methodist appointment system, they call you and you got 24 hours to decide? Is that how that works?
Yeah, unpack that a little bit. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
24 hours. Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. So it's like, hey, you've been appointed. You used to do the windshield tour as we're a little longer. Now we do the Google Earth. But yeah, 24-hour discernment. And, it's been set. You got to say. And so what we've always said is we're called to pray about it and give our answer. The mantle of authority is with our leadership, but they've asked us to pray about it. And there have been times where we said no. And we go, well, what are we going to do if they don't honor that? It's like, well, we're just asked to be faithful for our part. Now, if they break that, if they say, well, you're going to go anyway, at that point, that's their mantle of authority. They've asked us, we're being faithful to our piece. So I think, when you think about this whole process, we've been praying our whole marriage, 38 years. So when we come to these things, we've prayed together. And when it has come time to the next level up of authority, would say yes or no. At that point, it's like, well, God's got to deal with them if they disobey God. We have to be faithful to our part and tell them and be faithful to our part. But yeah, it's 24 hours, and then you have a meeting with the Staff Parish Relations Committee, kind of a married at first sight thing. Come in, hey, here's this. What do you think? You have a few minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes after an hour or so interview. So any red flags, I guess it's a go. We're actually we're changing how that appointment. It's more of a conversation until it's a decision now in our new movement. But yeah, everything I've had up to that point has been a phone call in 24 hours.
We've got listeners of all different, tribes and denominations and groups. We've got a pretty broad audience here at Church Answers and specifically EST. But we do have, I know Josh and I, we grew up in the Baptist world, and so we do have a significant group of Baptist or Baptist-like groups that listen in. And I know what they were thinking when they heard you say pension and safety net and guaranteed, and they're like, I am becoming Methodist. And then you said 24 hours to make a decision, and even if you say no, they still may put you there. They're like, nope,
like,
I'm out. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I'm curious, just real quick, how long is it typically between those calls? So can you root in a place, or are you like every 2 years we might get a call?
So it's really interesting. Back in the early days, and some of the churches I served, you look back, and it was a 1 to 2 year appointment, and they viewed churches and pastors as interchangeable. We're realizing, so the average appointment, the average tenure has been about 5 to 6 years. And really, when you play it out, and you guys have probably done the research, that's probably the same for many anyway.
Yeah.
We get to blame the hierarchy, and the call system blames God. But it's
I love it. That's great.
But we all, and that's part of, as we're moving forward in the new movement, we want longer tenures. So we're not going to roll the dice. The official party line was you're appointed a year at a time. And I always thought that was bad, because it's like, well, you may or may be gone next year. So there is that binding, that community connecting piece that there's a challenge inherent in our system. But we're trying, as we create a new model, while it's still an appointment, to make sure we have the best mix, the best match. We want longer tenure. We want longer appointments. And we're saying, you're there till you're not there, and you get to tell us when that happens. And so I think we're living into some of the best of both of those worlds, because there is some benefits to the call system. There's some great liabilities, vice versa with the appointment system as we've known it.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother episode, which we don't have time for. We're just going to have to leave that hanging. Hey, thank you for hanging with us all the way to the end of the show. Scott had some amazing things to say. So we were talking with Scott Pattison, President pro tempore. I just want to say that like it's, it just sounds so impressive. But a really down-to-earth guy. And that's why we wanted to bring him on the show, because he's like many of you. He's just kind of lived it. He's been in ministry his whole life. And he's had to make some tough decisions, and of late, he had to make a big change. And I thought it was worthy of discussion. And Scott, I just want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you, listeners, for listening in. If you are watching on YouTube, hit the thumbs up. It really helps the algorithms. And if you are listening via podcasting app, rate, review, and subscribe. Josh, I'm stealing your thunder, man. I'm like,
Hey, man, you're doing good.
I know usually you do the
going.
sign off, but I also want to thank our sponsor, Church Answers. Go check us out at the bookstore. We have a bookstore. Go to churchanswers.com, click on the bookstore link, and it'll take you to our bookstore, which is powered by Christian Book. We've got great curated content there. And when you make a purchase through Church Answers, it helps support us in our endeavor to certify African pastors. So there is a mission effort involved with the bookstore. So thank you again for tuning in. We've got a good episode coming up next week. We'll see you there.